Good evening, it is 8 o'clock and this is the UK Tonight. Coming up, Sir Alan Bates tells wrongfully convicted sub-postmasters to sue the government. In a letter seen by Sky News, the Post Office campaigner says that those still waiting for compensation should launch legal action, telling them at the current rate of progress, outstanding claims won't be resolved until November of 2027. Also ahead, materials needed to keep British steel going arrive in Scunthorpe. But questions remain about the long-term future of the firm. The business secretary visited the site today and appeared to row back on his claim that he wouldn't bring a Chinese company into the steel sector again. Plus, senior police officers lend their voices to calls for a ban on people under the age of 16 using social media. I'll be speaking to the journalist behind a major study. And an ancient oak tree thought to be more than 400 years old is cut down on health and safety grounds by the pub chain that owns Toby Carvery. The residents of Enfield in North London say they are devastated by the tree's loss. All that to come and much more on the UK Tonight. Hello and thank you for being with us. The Post Office campaigner, Sir Alan Bates, has urged fellow victims of the Horizon IT scandal to take legal action against the government. More than 900 sub-postmasters were prosecuted due to the faulty accounting software. Many of them are still waiting for compensation. And in an email seen by Sky News, Sir Alan suggested outstanding claims won't be fully settled for another 2.5 years. Well, he told victims that going to court would probably be the quickest way to ensure fairness for all. Sky's Greg Milam has our top story.
The Post Office scandal changed the lives of Seema Misra and Lee Castleton. She was wrongly jailed while pregnant. For him and his family, the impact, he says, was devastating.
We've just hung in there, haven't we?
For them and hundreds of other former sub-postmasters, the campaign for justice has gone on too long. Hello. And the man who is the face of that campaign says now's the time for legal action against the government over delays in the payment of compensation. In an email seen by Sky News, Sir Alan Bates writes that the current rate of progress means it will be November 2027 before all the claims will be finished. The scheme is a mess, he writes, and has been almost since the time of its inception. Advice on how to streamline the process, he says, is ignored out of hand with the feeblest of excuses. On seeking a judicial review, he writes, returning to the courts may seem to be a long haul, but it will probably be the quickest way to ensure fairness for all. It isn't a step, though, that Lee wants to take.
The civil servants have this endless supply of lawyers on one hand and monies to pay for lawyers on the other. This is a litigation without a judge. Alan Bates' call to arms is about money and fairness. All we need is the government of the day and the civil servants to finally give fairness. And I think that's going to be really hard to achieve in a court.
For Seema, this is about the money and closure.
I'm still waiting for full and final compensation, but like closure, nowhere near, because we are fighting for full accountability. That need to be done. The only thing that will tempt me to go back to the court will be accountability, proper accountability, proper closure for everybody.
There are just under 500 people in what's called the Group Litigation Order Scheme. More than 280 of those have been paid in full. Another 100 are awaiting action from either side before their claims or offers can progress. But that leaves 108 people who've been made offers by the government which they're challenging. Most have received 80% of their claim already, but Sir Alan's accusation is that government lawyers are slowing moves for them to receive the full and final payment. The government disputes that, saying it's more than tripled compensation payments since the election. It has paid out almost £900 million so far.
Everyone in the country wants this resolved as quickly as possible, and that's why we've increased the pace so much. But I can only go off the data, and the data tells me we've had this massive increase in compensation payments since the election, and we will not stop until we've done the right thing by everybody.
Sir Alan says any legal action should include the hundreds of people in other schemes. I've done my bit, he wrote. It's time for others to step up to deliver what so many are still waiting for. Greg Milam, Sky News.
Well, next tonight, the uncertain future of British steel. Materials to keep the blast furnaces going have been arriving in Scunthorpe throughout the day after the government was forced to effectively seize control of the plant at the weekend. And this comes with the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, now not ruling out future investment from China into the steel sector, contradicting statements he made on Sunday. Our North of England correspondent, Shinge Marike, reports now from Scunthorpe.
Arriving on the Lincolnshire coast, some of the raw materials it's hoped will help salvage British steel. Imported from the United States, around 40,000 tonnes of coking coal, vital for keeping the country's last blast furnaces alive. But the cogs turning in this saga are complicated, with the minister now in charge of British Steel rowing back on a pledge to keep Chinese firms away from the sector.
In this case, our difference of opinion on the future was with a specific company. I know there's a lot of interest in the wider UK-China relationship, understandably so, but this was about this company. A lot of the issues in the global economy with steel come from overproduction and dumping of steel products, and that does come from China. So I think you would look at a Chinese firm in a different way. But I'm really keen to stress the action we've taken here was to step in because it was one specific company that I felt wasn't acting in the UK's national interest.
The government is hoping today will form part of what it describes as a steady pipeline of raw materials being imported here over the coming few days and weeks, as part of what it hopes will help secure the future of British steel. Those raw materials are being brought here to the site at Scunthorpe in a race against time, with not just coke coal, but iron ore needed urgently to stop these blast furnaces cooling over. If the flow of these furnaces stops, there could be irreparable damage to the steelworks systems and, according to experts, a heavy cost.
Blast furnace campaign runs for maybe 20 years. Turning it off, you then have to strip it out, you have to reline it. It's a £200 million plus exercise. It takes 6 to 18 months to do, and you do it every 20 years. Even turning it down is quite a difficult exercise. So in difficult market conditions, for instance, you lose money every day and you go bust quickly.
That would spell disaster for a community that has steel in its bones and in its heart. They are hopeful the movement of raw materials is the start of a long-term solution.
It's been over a century of steel making in the town. We've had a couple of different sites. This is our main site now. This town is built on and around steel. It's in their blood. It's not about me. I've had my time through this business. It's about the younger elements coming into the business, good quality paid jobs. It keeps the community going.
Here and elsewhere, there are still plenty of questions about supply chains and the shape of steel making in the future. But there's also relief that, at least for now, this place is surviving. Shingi Marike, Sky News, in Scunthorpe.
Well, our science correspondent, Thomas Moore, has been looking at why the government has been racing to keep those furnaces running.
Emergency measures have been put in place to save the blast furnace at Scunthorpe from closing. But why is the government racing to keep the plant open? British Steel's owners, Jingye, had plans to stop all operations, but it's difficult and costly to stop and then restart a furnace. It's a process that involves draining molten material by drilling a hole in the structure. So how does a furnace work? Well, raw iron ore dug from the ground is dropped into the furnace at the top, along with a processed coal called coke. That's the fuel. It heats the iron so it melts, but it also starts a chemical reaction to remove oxygen from the ore and produce almost pure iron. The byproduct is the greenhouse gas carbon dioxide. The molten iron is then poured out down here at the bottom and processed further to make steel. The furnaces at Scunthorpe are running low on both coking coal and iron ore pellets. Without a fresh supply, the furnaces would have to be switched off in the next fortnight.
That's Thomas Moore reporting there. Now, an ancient oak tree in North London has been cut down by the owners of a nearby Toby carvery. The remains of the oak, which is thought to be more than 400 years old, were discovered by council workers last week in Whitewebbs Park in Enfield. Well, the tree was cut down by Mitchell and Butlers, the pub company that operates the nearby Toby Carvery. A spokesperson for the company says it was felled because it posed a health and safety risk. Sky's Victoria Seabrook was there earlier.
Well, an enormous row erupted today over the felling of this tree, this one that you can see behind me here that's had its branches cut off, its sort of severed limb-like branches lying on the floor around it. Residents are very upset because the tree is so big and so old. It's thought to be more than 400 years old and at its widest point around 6 metres around. And it's very important for other species in this ancient woodland around it. Now, when it was first cut down, there was quite a buzz and a bit of a mystery around it. Residents were furious that this could have happened. What we now know is that the hospitality company Mitchell and Butlers, who run the Toby Carvery restaurant here that leased this land from Enfield Council, they understood that that tree was dangerous because as parts of it were dying, it posed a risk to people visiting their restaurant and to their staff. They said they sought expert advice from an old arboricultural company, and in the end they were told that it had to be cut down for the safety of everyone. They also say that there was no tree protection order in place and that they did everything that they could to ensure that all legal processes have been followed. Residents and campaigners who try to protect this ancient woodland are very upset because they say that it's when trees like this get this old that they become so important for other species. Parts of the tree die and hollow out, and that draws in things like bats and bees, some of which are endangered and just wouldn't use the cut down parts in the same way if they were lying on the ground. So that's why people here have been so upset about this tree. At first it was that people were asking, is this London's Sycamore Gap, referring to that 150-year-old sycamore tree, that symbol of the northeast that was in the Robin Hood film and got cut down. Actually, it seems the circumstances are quite different, not so mysterious, and that the restaurant company was following advice, but the residents here, they just want to know exactly what happened, they say, so that they can make sure that this doesn't happen to any more trees in this ancient woodland.
That's Victoria Seabrook reporting. Let's speak now to Adam Cormack, who's head of campaigning at the Woodland Trust. Adam, thanks for being with us and good evening to you. So, look, just towards the end there of Victoria's reporting there, she talked about the fact that this tree was cut down, those behind Toby Carvery say, because it was dead. But you've visited this tree recently. What did you find?
Yeah, it wasn't dead because we found buds of leaves still growing on the kind of remains of branches that have been cut off the tree. And we've had some tree experts there in the last 2 days taking photos and videos. So the tree was very much alive, and I was quite surprised to hear a report that it was dead. It would be interesting to know who made the assessment that it was dead.
Well, they say, of course, that they've made an assessment. They had an expert look at the tree, and that was what they had decided because of health and safety concerns. I mean, that if that's what they found, that wouldn't be unreasonable. But you're saying that it was very much alive when you visited it.
Yeah, it was very much alive. Now, I mean, health and safety concerns are a valid reason to manage trees, and occasionally, it's never good when you have to remove a really special tree, but occasionally, trees do need to be cut down for health and safety reasons. You've got to be pragmatic about that. I think with an ancient tree like this, you're talking about one of London's oldest and largest oak trees. So there are about 600,000 oak trees across the whole of London. There's only about 100 that have got to this age and size, and a lot of them are in Richmond Park in South London. So this is a very scarce resource, a very important piece of natural heritage. There are other things you can do, like routing footpaths around trees. So Woodland Trust regularly does this in our own woods. And, originally the council said, Toby Carvery said that it was because the tree was dead. So we need to know, was the work commissioned because it was dead or not? And who made that assessment that it was dead?
Look, would the person you think that has done the assessment know how rare this tree was? I mean, it's kind of remarkable that of these kinds of trees, these really ancient ones, only 100 of them. Surely they would have known that.
No, I think most of the people who work sort of as tree surgeons, arboriculturists, like trees. They value trees and they work with them every day, and they would see a tree like this, and it sort of speaks for itself. You saw it in the report a minute ago. It's a very big tree, very old, and when you look at the limbs and the branches that were cut down, they're full of dead wood habitats, quite unusual, the kind of thing you find in a tree like this. doesn't necessarily mean the tree was diseased. So when trees get old, they do decay slowly, but over centuries in the case of oak trees.
So it could have gone on as you think. I mean, what happens next? You saw there were buds on it. So this happened with the Sycamore Gap, didn't it? That there is hope that tree will grow back. I mean, it's going to take hundreds and hundreds of years, of course, but this thing could grow back or not. So
it could grow back, in theory. There are certain species of trees that sort of bounce back more than others. Sycamore trees are probably a bit better at doing that than oak trees, but we don't know. So like the first thing would be to give it a chance to do that. But there's a bigger story here, which is about a silver lining for protection of other trees. So on Monday, the Tree Council published a report making some recommendations on new protections for very important trees. They were commissioned to do this by the government after the felling of the Sycamore Gap tree on Hadrian's Wall last year. So it's time for the government to take forward the recommendations in that report, do it for the Sycamore Gap tree and do it for the White Webb's oak tree as well.
Just explain what you're actually calling for the government to do in terms of that reporting.
So there's a private member's bill on the House of Lords at the moment, a heritage trees bill, which makes a number of quite simple recommendations about forming a list of heritage trees, like we do with listed buildings, treating them as important parts of our national heritage, and then bringing in a heritage tree preservation order, which you would use proactively to conserve our oldest and most special trees. And a tree like this would probably have one of those on it. So it's got a tree preservation order on it now, an emergency one that the Tree Office sensibly put on to protect the remains of it, to stop any more being removed. But what it really needed was a tree preservation order on it 2 weeks ago to stop it ever getting cut down in the first place, and or to make sure other measures could be taken to reduce health and safety risks if they were proven to be the case.
And trees like this, I guess, would be on your list to have those preservation orders put in if the legislation was to get through.
Yeah, you have to be realistic. We can't protect every tree like that. So we're talking about the oldest and most special trees. So this has some really interesting stories connected right back to Guy Fawkes. So this tree was probably about 30 to 50 years old when the gunpowder plot was hatched in White Webb's house, which would literally be a stone's throw from where this tree is growing. So these trees are a really important part of our kind of cultural history as well. So worth hanging on to.
I mean, if trees had ears, but again, this sort of speaks to the question as to why, if an expert had looked at it, they would have come to the conclusion that they should chop this thing down. I mean, like, explain as well to our viewers, Adam, as well, whereabouts this tree sits in sort of its environment. It was cut down for health and safety, that's what we've been told, but is it the most sort of obtrusive of trees in that particular area? There are other trees around it, right?
It's on the edge of an ancient woodland, so there are trees all around the car park. So the tree's about 14 metres back from the edge of a car park around the Toby Carvery pub. I should say, there might be information that Toby Carvery has that we don't have access to around latest health and safety updates. But like I said before, there are other alternatives to felling, particularly like rerouting people around. It's not uncommon to see areas fenced off at the base of really old and special trees. You've probably seen this in places like National Trust properties often do that kind of thing. That's to reduce the health and safety risk and to enable really important trees to live on. And I think one of the first questions for Toby Carvery would be, was that considered as an alternative to felling? And if not, why not?
I suppose in some ways, Adam, with this happening and with what happened to Sycamore Gap, the conversation is now ongoing. We're having these chats on television and in other places. The knowledge and the sort of the information about these ancient trees is out there more. So perhaps going forward, it's less likely that this could happen again.
Well, I hope so, yeah. And I mean, I've been on Sky News a couple of times in the last 2 years talking about similar incidents. I mean, the Sycamore Gap felling is the standout one because of the iconic location for that tree. And I think when that tree was felled, we all felt it, even if we didn't know the tree and hadn't been there ourselves. Like I said, there's now been a new report published, the Tree Council's report, 2 DEFRA, also produced by the Forest Research, government scientific advisors on forestry and trees. That's making recommendations and identifying gaps in the legal system for protection of these important trees. So the stage is set, really, to start taking something forward. So we'd really like to see that happening much sooner rather than later so that no more incidents like this can occur.
Yeah, but it's always good to have you on Sky News, Adam. Maybe we'll have you on next time in better circumstance.
That would be great, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. All right, Adam, enjoy your evening. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks.
Right, well, the owners of Toby Carvery, Mitchells and Butler, have issued a statement about this, and it reads as follows. The tree was cut back after we were advised by our specialist arboriculture contractors that it caused a potential health and safety risk. This was an important action to protect our employees and guests, as well as the wider general public, to whom we have a duty of care. We took necessary measures to ensure any legal requirements were met. We are grateful to our specialist arboriculture contractors for warning us of this potential health and safety risk, allowing us to act swiftly to address it. OK, still to come on the UK tonight. A warning, bin strikes could spread further than Birmingham. And senior police chiefs call for social media to be banned for people aged under 16. And I'm going to be speaking to the snooker player who has made history with two, not just one, two maximum 147 breaks in one match.
Sophie.
The big announcement.
The battle for number 10.
The drone is above us.
It is a chaotic scene.
They've asked us to leave.
It was a clear Labour landslide.
The car is covered in.
Liberated but left in ruins.
A major incident has been declared.
That's when misinformation floods the zone.
It became clear the media weren't welcome.
These extraordinary images.
Must have taken years.
Who wants to talk about politics?
OK, stand by.
I wouldn't be asking it if I didn't think it was a relevant question.
The winner of the 2024 presidential election.
Quite extraordinary events.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Hello and welcome back. Now, the Unite Union are warning that strikes by bin workers could spread beyond Birmingham as the dispute between the refuse workers and the council there drags on. Well, rubbish has been piling up on streets across the city for weeks after hundreds of workers walked out in a dispute over pay and conditions. And with councils all across the country struggling with their finances, there are fears that the scenes in Birmingham could be replicated elsewhere. Well, let's speak now to David Phillips from the Institute for Fiscal Studies for a bit more about how councils themselves are actually funded. David, thanks so much for being with us this evening, giving up some of your time. So, look, how are councils funded? How do they get money and how do they get themselves into positions like we see at this one?
Well, I think the important thing to recognise is that the last few years have been tough for councils for quite different reasons compared to the challenges they faced back in the 2010s. Now, after the financial crisis between about 2010 and 2019, councils' funding was being cut quite substantially. And of course, that meant cutbacks in services, and that did cause some financial pressures. Now, over the last few years, it's not really been that funding's being cut, funding's been going up. But the spending pressures they're under have increased substantially. Rising demands, rising costs for things like adult social care, children's social care, homelessness services, temporary accommodation, a whole raft of things. That's been putting upwards pressures on councils' budgets. And even with those funding increases, they've been having to make difficult choices. Now, the situation in Birmingham is a little bit unique, but down the line, as those pressures build, we might see more councils facing situations where they're having to make difficult decisions on their workforce, like Birmingham.
Yeah, it is quite unique in that city, but it is reported, the Institute for Government say that grants to councils were cut by 40% in real terms between 2009-10 and 2019-20, from 46 billion to 28 billion. I mean, that's just a huge cut in the grants that's coming from central government, and that's just one part of the funding, isn't it?
Yeah, so there were big cuts, as I said, during the 2010s with the central government funding, the grant funding from the government cut massively. That sort of stopped around 2020. And then since then, government funding for councils has been increasing, but not enough to obviously undo those earlier cuts or to keep pace with those rising pressures. Now, the real crunch point, the real issue, where we'll find out what the next few years look like for councils, there's two things. First is the Chancellor's spending review in June, where she will divvy up her money to say how much goes to the health service, how much goes to councils, and so on. That'll give a picture for local government across England. And then the government is also changing how funding is given to different councils to reflect how their circumstances have changed and what it thinks has been sort of a breakdown in the system. We'll find out how that's going to change how much each individual council gets later in the summer and then in the autumn. So I think the next few months will be really important for councils and their residents and their workers, of course, in thinking about the next couple of years in terms of what that means for their services, what that means for their jobs.
Yeah, when this government came in, they did announce they were going to look at this, and I think they've got their fair funding review. Is that still ongoing? They're still sort of thinking about how exactly to divvy up the money. I mean, it leads me to think, is there a different way of funding councils? Has that become part of the conversation as we're more and more aware of councils going into special measures, going bankrupt, because they run huge sort of organisations, but yet can't really operate in the way that small governments would like to, I guess?
Well, I think the issue here, as I said, is that even though their funding is going up, their demands and their costs even more. Now, I think there's a couple of ways to address that. The first is, I think that if we can sort of nip some of these issues in the bud a bit earlier, I think we need to look at the example, the children's social care system, the support for temporary accommodation, SEND. Can earlier intervention, can more investment up front save some money down the line? Can we boost the productivity of councils by doing more earlier in the chain that leads to some of these kind of costly interventions? That, I think, is a key part of the solution, if there is one here. But as you mentioned as well, councils actually have quite a narrow range of revenue-raising options. They raise quite a high share of their revenue themselves in this country, but it nearly all comes through property taxes, council tax on people in their houses, and business rates on businesses, on the property they occupy. Councils in other countries have some wider range of options. They might have a local income tax, they might have local business taxes, they might have a different range of fees and charges. I think the crux of the issue here is that councils either need to get more efficient or someone needs to pay more, whether that is money from the central government or money from local residents through new local taxes or local charges.
OK. David Phillips from the IFS, do appreciate your time and expertise this evening. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
OK, now, still to come on the programme, we will investigate how one of Britain's most shocking paedophile rings got away with their crimes for just so long. Sky News has spoken to a witness who says he sounded the alarm 2 years before one of the UK's biggest paedophile rings was brought down. A gang of Glasgow drug addicts have been sent to prison for almost a century, after a 7-year campaign of sexual violence against children who were known to the authorities and on the Child Protection Register. Our Scotland correspondent, Conor Gillis, has spent months investigating how this could have happened in plain sight. And on Morning, Conor's report contains details of child abuse.
What happened here is sickening. Monstrous crimes by a drug-addicted paedophile ring who got away with it for so long. And no one knows why.
Whoa!
The depths of human depravity. The bunch who organised nights to rape children in a filthy den full of heroin known as the Beastie House, where a girl was put in a microwave, where abusers laughed and filmed as youngsters were molested and money was exchanged. This is a city horrified, and one with serious questions. The 7-year campaign of violence began in 2012. Children were seen on the streets, malnourished and gaunt, visited regularly by social workers, and eventually, in 2018, placed on the Child Protection Register. And yet, the beatings and rapes continued. Police cracking the case 2 years later. We've spent months in this community, and understandably very few people are willing to talk about what happened. But I think there is one man who knew the victims, and I think he's going to speak to us. We have to protect his identity. We spoke on the phone, and he told Sky News he had concerns long before police got involved.
Seen them on a regular basis, every week. I kind of noticed things were wrong in 2018. One of their hair was a bit messy with head lice, and because she was the same age as my child, I said, "Why won't you do your hair?" That's when she went quiet, and she started talking a bit more adulty for a child her age. I'm seeing it from her point of view now that she has left them on her head to try and keep these beasts away from her. The head lice were protecting her from them.
He tells me he later spoke to detectives and is concerned the abuse went unchecked for 7 years.
They were always lingering around adults to try and get food. They were scavenging around for food. It was heartbreaking. I'm scunnered with it. Scunnered. The system has failed.
An independent learning review is now underway, examining those failures.
The challenge for them is how effectively we implement the recommendations.
But this former Children's Commissioner says there are questions around effectiveness.
I do recognise that when we have terrible, terrible cases such as this, that people are right to ask questions about how effectively our whole system is operating.
When a review's concluded, can it just sit in a tray, or are they legally bound to implement those recommendations?
It would be surprising if people don't act on the reviews, but if you're asking about whether there's a statutory framework, the answer is no.
Each one of these paedophiles is now behind bars. They believe they are the real victims, repeatedly claiming the children are liars. One of the lawyers involved was so sickened he has refused to work on sex abuse cases again.
So you were left with the impression that these were children who were known to the social work department, and it did seem surprising that steps hadn't been taken to remove them from the scenario they were in earlier. It's the worst example of child abuse I've ever heard. I've probably been involved in 400 trials in the High Court now, and many of them were sex abuse cases, and for many years I'd been considering refusing to take instructions in relation to those cases, and I suppose this was the straw that broke the camel's back.
There is consensus these children were failed, but our investigation raises fresh questions about how Scotland's biggest paedophile gang managed to cause such prolonged pain. Conor Gillis, Sky News, Glasgow.
Now, 4 police chiefs are calling on the government to ban social media for children under the age of 16. They've told a study led by The Times that further controls are needed to protect kids from violence, misogyny and extremism online. Well, earlier, I spoke to Rachel Sylvester, the chair of The Times Crime and Justice Commission, and I started by asking her what she found while investigating the issue.
was an issue that came up in virtually every evidence session that we took on issues as diverse as knife crime, violence against women and girls, fraud, cybercrime, and terrorism. And to be honest, I was really surprised by the scale of the problem and the extent and the number of people who were raising concerns, particularly the police. So the one that shocked me most was we took evidence on counter-terrorism and how to tackle that really very real national security threat. And Matt Jukes, who's the head of counter-terrorism for the police, told us that a fifth of the people arrested for terrorist offences last year were children, which I thought was absolutely astonishing. And 1 in 8 of those under investigation by MI5 are under 18. And Matt Jukes said very specifically that the cause of this was the online world and the grooming and recruitment and radicalisation of children online and particularly on social media. He compared it to cigarettes. He said, it took time to ban smoking for children and we took too long about it. And he said, we've got to act more quickly now. And the thing that surprised me really was we know a lot about the sort of mental health issues, concerns around social media, the distraction for children at school, but I hadn't realised the full extent of the impact on criminality and public safety and national security.
I mean, and that's the thing I think that jumps out from this reporting, that there is, from these police officers, and these are 4 senior members of the police force saying this, that there is a link between, as they see it, social media use in teenagers and then going on to commit crime. Is there a danger, though, that we're seeing these children committing these crimes and then trying to look back and work out exactly where they may have got their start and then putting the blame on social media?
Well, we heard about cases that have been almost entirely plotted, planned and triggered by and on social media. So you have knife crime fights being planned after school by children who then tell other children to come and watch these fights on social media. You have children basically revving each other up on social media, the different rival gangs. I was also really horrified by the impact on young women and young boys in particular. So the violence against women and girls in the real world that is being fueled by the really harmful material that children are seeing online. So 2 of the senior police officers responsible for tackling violence against women and girls, Sarah Crew, who's the Chief Constable of Avon and Somerset, who's the police lead on rape and serious sexual offences, and Maggie Blythe, who is the police lead on violence against women and girls, they both said that really, bad, violent, extreme behaviour is being normalised in the real world, and that they're really very worried about the impact on sexual assault, sexual violence, children mimicking and copying behaviour that they see online. Mm-hmm. Things like choking and strangulation are being normalised as sexual activities for these teenagers. It just seemed to us that it's almost irresponsible not to put restrictions on that, at least until these platforms can reassure us that this material is not going to be available for these children.
And you'll know what it's like when asks are made of these platforms. It's often warm words, but perhaps little action. There is a private members bill, of course, that's been put forward by the Labour MP Josh McAllister. Where are we with that? And from the work that you have done, I know that there is reporting that some of the recommendations in your Commission's report could well be accepted by the Justice Secretary. What reaction are you getting to this call to ban social media for the under-16s?
Well, Josh McAllister's bill was watered down quite heavily, although the government, I know, is still looking at the issue, and they've promised to go away and review this idea that you should raise the digital age of consent effectively from 13 to 16, which is what gives children the right to go onto these platforms without their parental consent.
But the watering down of McAllister's bill, from your perspective, means that the government aren't taking this seriously at this point.
Well, I hope it means that they are still looking at it. They've promised to review this idea and look at it seriously over the next few months. And I think the public is absolutely squarely behind further action to make sure that children are protected from really nasty material that is freely available on these platforms. We found 2/3 of voters were in favour of restrictions on social media for under 16s. And interestingly, an even higher proportion, more like 3/4, among those who are 18 to 24, who know perhaps better than any of us the harm that this material causes.
It's Rachel Sylvester speaking to me a short time ago. Now, the Real Madrid and Tottenham Hotspur legend Luka Modric is swapping the Bernabeu for the boardroom soon after becoming an investor and co-owner at the Championship side Swansea City. The 39-year-old is part of a wider ownership group. Now, the club haven't yet said just how much he's invested. So, will his experience help get the Swans back into the Premier League? Well, let's speak to the co-host of the Only Swans podcast, Kamali Melbourne, who's joining us now. Kamali, thanks so much for making time to speak to us there. I bet you're delighted by this news that Modric has invested in the club.
Yeah, it's absolutely massive. I mean, it's just unbelievable, to be honest.
What did you make of it when the news came out? Was it rumoured? Did we know that he was interested in doing this? How's this come about?
It sort of just came out of nowhere, to be honest, and I was just absolutely shocked by it all.
Do you have any idea how much money he's put into it?
No, we're not quite sure yet, but hopefully it's a decent amount, you know.
Yeah, would hope so. I mean, Swans were relegated in 2017-2018. Mid-table now at the moment, I think. Is that right?
Yeah.
So, this season you'll write this off, and then next season will be the one to get yourself back up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this could really, change things for us. It's going to up our stature in the game completely.
I mean, it's going to definitely bring a lot more eyeballs onto Swansea City. I mean, and a player of his stature as well. This is an investment, co-owner. Do we have any idea if he's going to have anything to do with the playing side of it? Because there's a new setup at the club now, isn't there?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if he's going to come and play yet, but he seems to really want a, hands-on role. So fingers crossed, we're going to see a lot from him over the next few years. Yeah,
and I wasn't suggesting he would turn out for you, but maybe at least be on the training ground, offering some of that advice. I mean, listening to Luka Modric, the man who can keep going, would be useful for anyone, I suppose, at any stage in their career.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as I said, the stature he has in the game. I mean, 6 Champions Leagues, a Ballon d'Or. You can't really do much better for this generation. So it's unbelievable.
It really is. So look, when you heard the news, you thought it was a bit of a joke. But what's been the reaction around the city now? You must have a game coming this weekend as well. Everyone's going to be buzzing now going into the end of the season.
Yeah, so we've got a game on Friday. It's a real sort of feel-good factor around the club now, and it's just really good to see because we've had a few years we've been a bit stagnant, so it is fantastic.
And what does it mean for sort of Welsh bragging rights as well? Obviously, everyone's heard about all the investment in other clubs in the area. Obviously. And in North Wales, of course, as well, in Wrexham. So what's happening with you guys now? You've got Luka Modric. I think you're winning in that battle, maybe?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, hopefully it's sort of a similar story and we can get that rise to the Premier League before then.
OK, well, look, Kamali Melbourne, delighted for you and for the club as well, and all the best. And I guess we'll check in with you again around about this time next year and see what impact it's had.
Yeah, great.
All right, man. Thanks very much. Good evening.
Thank you.
All right, still to come on the UK Tonight. I'm going to be speaking to a Welsh snooker player who's become the first ever to make a maximum 147 twice in just one match. And we'll have the latest updates as Villa take on Paris Saint-Germain in the Champions League quarterfinals.
The Premier League Run-In is live on NBC and streaming on Peacock, with a crucial fixture in the race for Europe. Saturday, the unrelenting drama heats up as both Aston Villa and Newcastle chase Champions League qualification. An opportunity neither want to squander. This is the Premier League Run-In, live on NBC and Peacock.
The only way into Gaza for us right now is with the Israeli military. The IDF had brought us in to show us a tunnel network under a residential neighbourhood.
The length of time it must have to have created these tunnels must have taken years.
At the end of the day, it's war at the top.
It's war down here.
I'm Alistair Bunkle, Sky's Middle East correspondent based here in Jerusalem. As we were filming, there was a gun battle in the next street.
This neighbourhood, the Israeli military say, was the stronghold of Hamas's Rafah brigade.
It was just after 6:30 a.m. when the first shots were fired.
I remember everything. It was a day that I don't think I'll ever be able to forget.
There's no moon, perfect conditions for smugglers and human traffickers trying to move fuel, weapons and people.
The valleys in between, they're some of the main smuggling routes.
After days of negotiation, a major smuggler here has agreed to meet us.
The families that we've spoken to of people who have died trying to cross into Europe, they say you're a murderer. Are you a murderer? No.
Sky News, get the full story first. Begum was 15 when she left East London with 2 school friends to join Islamic State in Syria.
Do you feel that you have committed a crime to the extent that you should serve time in a British prison?
I mean, I feel like the only crime I committed was coming here.
If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. I can take the heat. The second thing that Harry Truman said, was in politics, if you want a friend, get a dog.
My children will love a dog.
In Tel Aviv, a constant streak of interceptions filled the night sky as waves of missiles came in.
It appears to be a very, very large and sustained attack on Israel.
Hello there and welcome back. Now coming up, I'll be speaking to the snooker player who has made history qualifying in the World Championships with 2 1-4-7 breaks in one match. Let's talk the rest of the sport, and David is here with us. David, good evening to you. We're going to talk boxing, aren't we? Because there's been perhaps some exciting developments today.
Well, yeah, we're talking about a potential return to the ring for Tyson Fury. Now, we have been here before with Tyson Fury. He retired after his second defeat, the rematch with Alexander Usyk. Retired then. He has come back before, 2013, 2017, he retired and then came back. And this speculation started to gather a little bit of pace when he uploaded a video of himself on his Instagram page, throwing some hands, doing some boxing in the gym, and everybody started to go, well, is this the beginning of the return of Tyson Fury? But one of his promoters out in the States, Bob Arum, legendary promoter, has promoted Tyson Fury a number of times out in the States, knows him really well, has poured a bit of cold water on that, essentially saying that he doesn't believe Tyson Fury will ever return to the ring. And he's put it down essentially to the cash. I think he took around about £60 million from the second defeat against Alexander Usyk. That's from a loss, remember. He's taken home £60 million. So he doesn't need the money. And Bob Arum's argument really is, what is he going back for? Is he going back for money? Is he going back for legacy? And what's left for him, really? He's lost twice to Alexander Usyk. The only thing that might be left for him now is a British mega fight against Anthony Joshua.
Yeah, if they can ever get that one signed off, we'll see. But one fight that is looking likely this summer, another great British heavyweight involved in that, Daniel Dubois against the man Usyk.
Yeah, Alexander Usyk. So after the rematch against Tyson Fury, Usyk, undisputed champion, he holds all the belts. He had to vacate one of those, which ended up going to Daniel Dubois, the Brit. And now we're talking about another undisputed fight. And key to this, actually, is the venue, because we've seen a lot of the mega fights go out to Saudi Arabia over the last couple of years. They're able to put up a lot of cash to hold these fights. And now we're talking about a potential date this summer in July at Wembley Stadium for an undisputed heavyweight fight. And bear in mind that before Alexander Usyk, the last undisputed heavyweight champion was Lennox Lewis, and that was 99-2000. So we had to wait 25 years for one in Alexander Usyk, and now we could get another Brit being undisputed champion in the summer. So that's heavyweights in the summer.
It's exciting summer.
Heavyweights on the pitch tonight in the Champions League as well.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
Harry, let's take you back to your last job in Japan. Just talk to us a little bit about that experience, the success you had out there.
I had the time of my life out there. And Japan is such a beautiful country, beautiful people. The most exciting thing is the actual J-League. I think it's probably one of the most competitive leagues that I've worked in, because they've structured it very well regarding with homegrown players, to import players. They've got the right kind of mixture. When I went out there, the idea was to progress in the AFC Champions League. They were dominant in the league, but what they wanted to achieve was, you know, success in the AFC Champions League, and that's something that they failed to do. It was fantastic because what a wonderful experience we had out there. We got to the final, which was exceptional effort from the players, from the team, from the club, from the fans. Everyone pulled together. For the experience and for the club itself, they were over the moon of making an AFC Champions League final.
I'm interested in how that helped you to develop as a coach, because that's an experience that a lot of coaches over here don't have.
I'm a firm believer in getting experience. I think
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Thank you for that, David. Now, a Welsh snooker player has become the first person ever to make a maximum 147 twice in one match. 23-year-old Jackson Page managed the feat during his win in the third round of the World Championship qualifying. The achievement also secured him a £147,000 bonus. Very nice, and I'm very glad to be able to see we can speak to Jackson now. Jackson, thank you so much for being with us. How are you feeling?
Yeah, very good, yeah. Over the moon.
I mean, it's not too bad, is it? Am I right to say as well that you've never made a maximum break before?
Never in a professional tournament, no. It's my first and second one, I suppose.
Wild. And you got a nice little payday out of it too, not too bad.
Yeah, it was a good bonus. I didn't know about it until after making the first one. So, yeah, it's a very nice bonus. Just glad I managed to make history, I suppose.
Well, you have made history, man. You've done really well. We're really pleased for you. And I think what's fascinating about it as well is that, you know, with a game of skill like that, you think that you might be in the zone doing it and you do it over an evening. But you did this on the Sunday and then you came back, you had a sleep, and you came back and did it on the Monday.
Yeah, it's just a mental situation, really. I managed to finish off, one frame short of the first day, and then finished the match off completely the second day we won. It was just, a bizarre scenario, but I tried, I went for it really in the second time, and somehow I managed to make it happen.
When you're in that sort of mode, when you're getting close to that break, I mean, it must be terrifying all the way along as you're getting closer and closer. But do you sense, are you feeling yourself? Do you know that you're playing well and everything's dropping for you?
Yeah, it's a bizarre one for me because it's never happened before. So it's a different kind of sort of feeling and pressure. But yeah, I was actually quite calm about it. I had one tough shot, at the end of the second break. When that went in, it was kind of all there for me then, and I just felt all right.
So just the one tough shot. I mean, it could have been much more difficult, but you dealt with what was in front of you, and I suppose that's all you can really do, isn't it?
Yeah. Just the second break was a lot harder than the first one because I was trying to make things happen, but they just kept popping out one by one. So I just glad that they kept popping out.
Do you look across at your opponent when that's going on? He's sitting there shaking his head, drinking his water, thinking, "Am I going to get back to the table?"
Well, to be fair, Alan, the fella I played, he was, afterwards he said, "Okay, play." He shook my hand and said, "Well done." So, it's great sport there and, great professional. So, I got to take my uplifting for that as well,
No, you've done really well. And you're playing again tomorrow as well, so you've got to get back at it. Another 147?
Well, maybe. You never know. Let's focus on the frame first from now on.
Yeah, man. Well, you've done really well. Congratulations, Jackson. A really good talk to you. Good luck tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, man. All right. Well done, Jackson Page. Let's take a look at the weather.
The ideal atmosphere, whatever the altitude. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
It's going to be cool and unsettled going into Easter weekend with widespread showers and longer spells of rain. Many places are going to be dry, though, this evening. The windy southwest will see outbreaks of heavy rain. There'll also be a few showers around locally. They'll be heavy and thundery for East Wales and central England. Heavy rain in the southwest will move into parts of Ireland and Northern Ireland overnight, while central and western Britain will become more showery. Most other places look dry, with a local frost in the far north and west. It's going to be windy for southern Britain with coastal gales possible. Central Britain and Northern Ireland, along with parts of Ireland, will see rain tomorrow morning. Locally, it could be heavy.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Well, that's all from the team here on UK Tonight. Barbara Serra is up with the world next. You can catch the highlights on our website or scan the QR code. We're back with you again, same time tomorrow evening.